Welcome to the Subtle Secrets of Pranayama, my 30-day challenge. This is day 17, and we've been exploring all of the aspects of breathing, why pranayama is beneficial for your health. I'm sorry, someone's calling me. And many other aspects of pranayama. And today, what I want to talk about, I want to get started talking about ratios, because ratio breathing is one of the most basic pranayama breaths. So we've done 3-part breathing, we've done belly breathing, we talked about structural breath. Those are all wonderful breathing tools. And now the technique to bring in is ratios, because ratios are how you start to influence the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system is the part of your nervous system that typically keeps everything in homeostasis in your body, right? So for example, your heartbeat, your temperature, your sense of balance, all of that is mediated, and many other things are mediated through the autonomic nervous system, right? And also digestion, right? Breathing typically is autonomic. Now, there are very few autonomic functions that can come under conscious control. And one of them that can come under conscious control is your breath. So that means your breath is a direct line into the autonomic nervous system, which means if you're dealing with anxiety or depression or other health challenges, an inability to regulate the stress response, inability to regulate emotional responses, that the breath is the gateway to doing that, to bringing things under control. And so ratio breathing is one of the most basic techniques that you can do, and the ratios can become incredibly elaborate. This is a complex and sophisticated science. It's not a simple practice. However, there are simple parts of the practice, right? So you can start very simply and then start to expand your awareness. And that's what I love so much about ratios, is you can start with simple techniques and then start to make them more complicated and more interesting and more valuable to the control of the autonomic nervous system. Okay. So the technique I like to use for ratio breathing, and this might be different for you, but the one I like for ratio breathing is Dirga Pranayama. So belly to ribs to chest. And then I do that with a count. Why is counting useful? Counting is useful because counting is math, and math is boring. It puts you into the front brain and takes you out of limbic activation. The limbic system part of your brain is where we have that emotional ruminative kind of part, thinking part, the reactive part as opposed to the responsive part. So the responsive part would be this front brain, right? So counting is very front brain. That's why people use counting sheep to fall asleep, right? I want to say one thing about ratios is that there is no such thing as a golden ratio, right? There's not one perfect ratio for everybody. So Andrew Weil says something like, oh, you need to do a 4-7-8 breath, or you'll hear, the therapist will often tell me, oh, we learned square breath, 4-4-4-4, and I will say that those are all very simplistic renderings of a complex, sophisticated science, and they will not work for every person because your nervous system is completely different, and your breathing is a reflection of years and years of development and biasing of your nervous system. So your breath is completely individual to you. Your breath is your biography, essentially. So because of that, ratios are going to be very different for different people. What I like to tell people is start with, and you can do this right now while I'm talking, start by finding an inhale and an exhale that feels comfortable, right? So maybe it's 3, maybe it's 6. There's no Olympics of breathing. So a longer ratio does not mean anything that you're better, There are some implications of that. We can get into that later about how long the ratios are. But, this isn't a competition. You don't have to be David Blaine and hold your breath for 17 minutes underwater. That's not what we're doing here. We're simply trying to connect to the autonomic nervous system to create more balance, homeostasis, stability in the system, right? So starting right now with perhaps 3 or 4, 5, 6 in, 3, 4, 5, 6 out. You can try that yourself right now and see what feels smooth and even and easeful. Now, that's all we're going to do for today. Inhale, exhale. You can keep doing it while I'm talking. Inhale, exhale to an even ratio, right? 4, 5, 6, something like that. If you feel like, I got to 6 and it's really super easy and not very interesting, then try 8. That's okay. But don't think that longer ratios equates with better pranayama. That's a very reductive idea, and it's not accurate, right? Because your system is uniquely yours. Now, here's a couple things I want to tell you about the numbers. Let them be smooth and subtle and even and sort of soft and relaxing. So in other words, you're not going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's not like that. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4. It's approximately a second. Might be a little bit longer, might be a little shorter. Maybe tomorrow we can talk about metronomes a little bit because they can be really helpful when you're starting this practice. But your assignment for tonight, the only practice we're doing today, is even breath in and out. If you like, you can use the Dirga Pranayama. Belly, ribs, belly goes back in as chest expands, right? So belly, ribs, chest, belly goes back in a little bit because you can't keep your belly out as you're expanding your chest. So belly, ribs, chest, about 4 or 5, maybe 6 counts on an inhale, same on the exhale, smooth, even breath. Try it for 5 minutes and then you don't just do it and then walk away. You try it for 5 minutes and then you stop and do that interoceptive awareness pause, because that is where you really start to stitch into the brain the benefits of this practice and stitch into those areas of the brain like the hippocampus that remember, that say, oh, this is really interesting and it helps to shift my system. You know, I've done a lot of public speaking over the years, and I'm much more comfortable with it than I used to be. But I used to get up there. I remember a couple of times I had to get up and talk in front of 75 or 100 people, 150 people at one time, and my heart would be like, you know, terrified. And I would do my ratios, and I'll tell you what that ratio is in another video, but I would do my ratios and I could get up there and I could talk because it has such a direct effect on that autonomic nervous system. It's so powerful. So I love ratios. I hope that this has been useful for you. Leave a comment, please, or questions. I'll get to them on Monday. So I am taking the weekend off. Not really. I'm taking the weekend off from this because I'm teaching a workshop this weekend at the Embodiment Center here in Asheville. There's still a couple spaces. Let me know if you want to come for it. It's called the Neurobiology of Embodiment. Thank you for being here, and have a great weekend. Bye.